Cool, so we've got our coal set up, we've got our vents in position. We're actually now going to add an external thermometer. So whilst these thermometers are good, we always want to make sure that the pit temp is at the right temp for the meat. So we're actually going to add an ambient pit probe, and I'm using the Fireboard 2 drive today, which I believe is the gold standard for thermometers. So we're just going to put this on the far side of the grill. So we want it at the furthest point away from the fuel. And that essentially means that we're measuring at grill level for where the meat's going to go. So we're going to wait for that to creep up to about 275, adjust our vents to dial that in, and then go from there. Okay, so our Charmate Cob Jnr is now up to temp, so we're actually going to get the standing rib roast in. As you can see from the surface of the meat, it's sweated out nicely, so all that rub's nice and stuck to the protein. So we're just going to get this into the pit now. So as I said, we want indirect cook, so we're going to put it on the furthest side of the pit that we possibly can. Just going to even this out slightly, just make sure it's all nice and tight in there. And we're just going to take a little bit of duck fat. So this duck fat product I use on a lot of beef. It's really good to just add another layer of flavour and complexity. So we're just going to give it a bit of fat just to help the process along in terms of developing that bark on the outside of the meat. And the final step, once we've put duck fat on the outer of that meat, is to put a temperature probe. Now what I'm doing here is I'm going directly in the center of that meat, and I want to get that probe as far in as I possibly can. So that's giving me my reading now of the internal temperature. And we're going to be cooking this through. It's actually quite a large piece of meat. So if you were doing an individual steak, you'd probably take it up to sort of 110, 115. We're actually going to take this up to about 120 today because it's such a big piece of meat. So we've got that probe in, it's in the center of the meat. I'm happy with the setup. The wood is starting to combust. So we're going to shut that now, and we'll come back to that later once it's hit temperature. Cool, so it's been about an hour and 10 minutes and our standing rib roast has hit 120 internal. So we're literally just going to take this off, and you can see got really good bark on this. Okay, so we're about 10 minutes from searing this standing rib roast. So one final action is just to get some duck fat onto the outside. The duck fat is pretty neutral in flavour, but when you add that to rubs, it absolutely lights up the taste. So I like to give it a good coating of duck fat before we sear this off. Okay, so while our steak was resting, all I've done here is pour a good layer of lump on top of the lit fuel that was in the minion. And I've just opened the Cob Jr to allow that to ignite and get super hot. So we want it 600-700 degrees for searing now. So what we're going to do is we're just going to sear off all sides of this standing rib roast, and then it will be ready to serve. So that's been resting for 20 minutes, given time to relax. All the juices have reabsorbed. So we're just going to caramelize the outside of it now. And you'll see that the duck fat obviously ignites, and that aids the caramelization. So we want as many flames as we can around that just to give it that good sear. If you have a look at the surface of the meat here, you can see it's like molten lava inside. So we know we've got smoke penetration. So that smoke's got right into the meat during that smoking phase. So these are all the little signs that we're looking for a good cook. Hit the right internal temperature, the caramelization's looking great, lots of flames, lots of heat. It's going to be a good time. Okay, so we're about ready to take that off. I'm really happy with the caramelization. So we'll just take this onto a board and go and slice. Okay, so we've seared off our standing rib roast. So we're just going to take a slice from here just to see what we've got. And what we should see is a perfect medium to medium rare piece of meat, wall to wall. You can actually see here that you've got the smoke ring all the way around the outside, so we know that the smoke's penetrated, and we've got a lot of juice pouring out of that, so we're pretty happy with the way that looks.